Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's my delight to have Veronica Swift on and look forward to what we will be talking about. But want to give you, Veronica, a chance to just share a little bit about yourself and maybe some history about your blog and why you do what you do.
Thank you, Adena. It's great to be back. I took June off. Well, not completely, but from writing and tried to take a little break, and it's nice to be back. I'm glad to see you again. Um, so I got introduced to the occult for the first time at a rather late age and kind of deep into my distress about how the world was working and very confused. And I don't know about you, but I've often noticed that when there's a lot of confusion or when I have a lot of confusion, it's because I don't have the correct information. Like there's pieces missing and I just don't know what they are. So I talked to a lot of people for a long time. Basically anybody who would listen to me complain in question form about what the world was. Why is this stuff happening? Why is it, and at that time it wasn't even as weird as some of the stuff that has been going on more recently, but I didn't understand the political scene, and I didn't understand what was going on in a lot of institutions. And I was in a variety of different educational situations, and they were really, I mean, the stuff that people were doing is just wild. And I thought that this isn't organic. It doesn't feel like it's coming from the bottom up. Something's top down, and they're driving this in a direction that makes no sense. Like nobody with a working set of two brain cells that are communicating with each other are going to be doing this stuff. So what is it? So I must have asked for a really long time, and God's God's faithful to give you what you ask for. Sometimes you have to wait. I didn't really have to wait, but I just didn't understand that the answers that I was getting were what I was asking for. So I wasn't connecting my questions to the answers. So one person in my life spent about a year trying to talk to me about why the world was wrong. And I'm like, but this, that can't be the case. It can't be the case. It's just not possible. And, I've heard rumblings of weird stuff like that before, but man, it's weird and it doesn't make any sense. So I spent a lot of time hanging up the phone on this individual. Um, and so I think God had to up the ante, right? Because I wasn't really getting it. When you don't get it, then so I had this experience where I stepped up on a step and like blew my knee to smithereens. I don't have a clue, how I did it because it was just literally like walking up a stair step. And so I was off my feet for months and months and months. I was in bed for months on end while this was recuperating. And so I watched a lot of videos, and that's not my normal thing, right? And I got so bored. I was watching any video I could find anywhere. And at that time, I had discovered Sarah Westall, so I'd watched like 50 of her videos, and it happened to have been that Jessie was on one of her October shows. It wasn't the first or second or third. I think it was like the fifth, maybe fourth or fifth show she had done. And I found it in the latter part of October of 2020. And it just hit me. I think I picked my jaw off the floor about 12 times during the whole video. I felt like I had to scrape it off off the floor and just kind of shove it back so that it was in place again because I found what she said to be so astonishing. I'd never heard anything like it before. I'd never been introduced to anything like it before. But there was something in it that clicked with me, and I just thought, there's something in this. I don't know what it is, but it sits right with me as being the possible answer to all these questions that I've been asking. And so I spent the next 3 months really kind of digging backwards and trying to figure out who she was and trying to figure out what was going on and trying to understand what she was talking about because I really didn't get it. It's when you don't understand anything about the occult and you don't know there's an underground and you don't know what magic is and you don't know anything about anything. It really takes a long time to learn. It took me forever, but I was so incredibly bored. After sitting for so many months doing nothing, I thought, oh, this is great. I can occupy my mind. I can at least learn a little bit about this. So I filled a notebook, like a 1.5 inch 3 ring binder with notes and information and all sorts of stuff. And at that point, I had so many bits of information. I thought I'm not really organizing this very well. And I thought, ooh, the other thing I wanted to do for a really long time was learn the mechanics of blogging. Like, how do you do that? It seemed, and I had had a blog, and it was very badly done, and I didn't really understand it. In fact, I did it so badly, I had to scrap it and just, I had to just dump it, the whole thing. And I thought, well, this information, it's so wild and out there. I could start a blog and I could write some stuff on this, and nobody's ever going to read it. That was my thought. Nobody is ever going to read this. This is a safe place. This is a comfortable place to just explore text because I didn't really want to do anything with images. I had done a lot with images on my first blog, and I think that was one of the reasons that I had to just tank it because I didn't know what I was doing with the images. You have to do certain things with images to make them work on the web and not be too big or bulky and make the page not load and all that stuff. So I thought, this is great. I can just write words and I don't have to deal with images, and I can learn the mechanics of the blog, and I can fuss around with this, and I can write a lot of little blogs and learn how to organize it all. So so that's what I did. I thought, I'm going to start over. I'm going to start over doing this, and I've got some freedom here, and maybe one or two people will read this, and if I share it, maybe it'll help them because boy, I'm confused, and this information is like all over the place. Like, you can find information about the same topic or the same experience in like 7 different videos or 8 or 9. And for me at that point, that was a lot to try to pull all that information together and get all the bits so it made sense, like it was a story, a complete story, instead of individual pieces of information that kind of floated around in my head and drove me crazy. So I got about 6 blogs in, also really not knowing what I was doing at this point. And unbeknownst to me, if you cite another WordPress blog, like if you put a link to another person's blog or website in your article, it sends them a notification, which I had no idea. So this blog sent a couple people notifications because I had put links in this particular blog to other people. And one of the people had a fairly large web following. And I was about ready to go out the door one day. I think it was in February of 2021. And I suddenly had like 15 comments and about 1,000 views in the span of 10 minutes. And so I almost fell off the chair. And a lot of the comments were, well, you spelled this wrong. And true, I wasn't really paying attention to spelling. I was trying to figure out how to get this thing organized so it would work on the internet. So I went back and I fixed all the spelling errors, and I fixed the bits and pieces that people were, telling me what weren't working right. And then I sweated a lot. And I thought, what on earth is going on? I think I just fell into a rabbit hole here. I did not think anybody was interested in this information, and maybe there are other people who know something about it, and I got to figure out what's going on. So that was the start of this journey that I really did not intend to continue. Like, I wanted to figure out how to create a blog. I wanted to organize some of my thoughts on the occult. And I just kept being astonished that people were reading it and finding it valuable. So here I am 4.5 years later, almost 5. October will be my 5th anniversary of discovering the occult. And I've got, over 400 blogs, and moved from a free website, free, WordPress blog, to my own website, courtesy of some really generous people who have helped out along the way. And lots of people seem to be, even though this blog is now behind a paywall, lots of people seem to be reading it. It's also gotten a lot of attention, negative attention, from people who do not want this information out, because unbeknownst to me in the beginning, the occult is also very interested in hiding this stuff. They don't want it to be of general knowledge, and it's taken me, I've asked a lot of people over the past, I've asked you, I've asked a number of other people over the past, I think, year. I don't, because from the vantage point of an author, I'm not really understanding exactly what's valuable to people about this, because it kind of, I just, so I had a lovely, lovely lady explain in detail to me last night, because I was a little distraught about some things that had happened. And I just kind of went ballistic and said, I don't get this. I don't understand what's going on. And she laid it out. And so um, there aren't a lot of people who are writing on the occult. And there isn't anybody else in the world that I know of. If there is, let me know. Isn't anybody else that's collecting a lot of disparate bits of information from probably a good 50 to maybe 75 survivors and is pulling it together the way I find it valuable for myself to understand it. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people find valuable. And they also find my voice and my tone and my courage valuable. That also brings along with it a lot of people who, don't want this information out and will blatantly tell me I don't want this information out and I want you to stop writing on this individual and I'm going to harass you for the rest of your life if you don't stop writing on this individual and I'm going to make you my project for the rest of your life. I'm going to dog you if you don't do what I say. So it's a mixed bag. I'm really, really grateful for the people that have send me messages constantly telling me that what I'm doing is valuable for them because that keeps me going and it helps me hurdle the interminable, every day, more or less, you know, harassment that I see around me. And I have had to stop looking at a lot of it. I cannot view it and stay sane. So if you're out there and you want to write nasty things about me, you go right ahead because I'm not going to read them because I don't care anymore. I'm on my like third, fourth, fifth set of people who don't like what I do. And in the beginning, so this is the value in doing some looking at what people say who've harassed me. And about 2 years into writing the blog, I got some death threats and some threats of lawsuits and some, all sorts of different nasty comments from some kind of bigwigs inside the occult, and I didn't really know what was going on at that point. I didn't really know who they were. I didn't know what the point was. I had buried myself inside writing, and I wasn't really on social media at that point, so I wasn't really seeing a lot of what was going on either. A lot of the comments. And that was the point at which I thought, I'm all right. I'm done. I'm good. I'm going to quit writing because I don't really want to deal with this stuff. I've learned how the mechanics of how to put together a blog, and it's not beautiful, but it works. I have a functional um, page where all the links to all the blogs were. I have functional pages. I have functional links. I have, everything goes together. So I shut it down, and it was like deluged with people who said, "I really want access. I don't care. I'll pay. Let me have access." And I thought, okay, well, maybe if I just set the price so high, nobody will pay it, then we can do that. So I put them all behind. I made them all private and password protected, and just said, all right, here's the price, and you're welcome to have access to them, but you're going to have to pay for access. And I thought nobody's going to do that because they want, they're going to want it free, and they're not going to want. Well, then they paid for it. So then I had another problem on my hands, was just to figure out what to do then because it was kind of awkward. And then someone stepped forward and said, I can create a website for you that will do what you need it to do, that will have a subscription base and, process payments and things like that, which was very awkward for me with a free WordPress because you can't do any of that. So I had to set up locals, which is why I have a locals account, because at that point, that was the only way I could bring money in. And so I want to talk about money too for a minute, because a lot of people get really nasty about I get a lot of friendly fire as well about putting this behind a paywall. And so I'm just going to state publicly that the funds that come in from the blog subscriptions, $26 a year, which is relatively low when you consider that many other people who have groups like this are charging $30 a month. Anywhere from 10 to $30 a month is what I've seen. So 26 a year is like $2.16, 17 cents. It's like less than a cup of coffee. So I thought that was fairly reasonable. The money that comes in from that goes for site hosting. We just paid a site hosting bill that was in the range of $600 to $800. It goes for, you have to pay for domain names. You have to pay for plugins. You have to pay. I have to maintain a computer. I've gone through 3 computers now for this blog. I have to pay for internet access. I have to pay for subscriptions. Those are blooming expensive too. Some of the subscriptions that I use to gather the information that I need are, $80 for 6 months or $100 for 6 months. So I really appreciate all the people who are willing to pay that amount for access because it allows me to have a much more functional and much more upgraded and much more versatile website versus having just a free WordPress blog. It allows me to do a lot more things. It allows me to sell a print copy of the book and an ebook copy. It allows me to make some free and some paid, and there's just a lot of flexibility with it. So I really appreciate that. So the funds that come in go to cover operational costs and expenses. And the other thing that we do with the funds, if there are any left over, is that we donate to reputable survivor organizations and individuals who are in crisis. So if you're subscribing to the blog, that's what your money is going for emergencies, crisis survivors, um, survivor organization support, and operational costs. I don't take a salary for anything that I do. None of this money comes into my bank account. So I'm still doing it for free. I'm still like I have from the beginning. And that's the way I want to keep it. So thank you to people who do not who are appreciative enough to donate, who make this possible, and who don't harass me about where the money comes, because it seems like a lot of people just really enjoy making it a big deal that I've got transcripts behind a paywall and I've got the blogs behind a paywall. The transcripts behind the paywall, which someone recently harassed me about, the transcripts are there and they're behind the paywall because I provide resources and sources for every single thing that I write. Not one single thing that I write comes without a source for my subscribers. And the transcripts I had on a separate free WordPress site initially, and they were being used to harass survivors with. They would search for terms or words or subjects, and then they would take that information and they would harass survivors with it. And that's not okay with me. So I'm not leaving them out there for complete public access at this point. There's 1,200 of them or more that I have available online if you're a subscriber as well. So that's kind of the history of the blog. I've never gotten out from underneath people being pissed off at, me charging. I've never gotten out from underneath people wanting me to stop writing about certain people, even though they're not subscribed. They don't know what I'm writing about. They have no idea what I've said. They still want me to stop writing about people. Um, so this is, it's a labor of determination at this time because the more I get hassled, the more determined I am that there's something valuable in this that I may not understand, but I'm going to make darn well sure it goes out so that if people can get benefit off of it, they will. And so that's a long diatribe about my blog, but thank you for letting me put that out there because I don't really talk about it a lot. I certainly haven't talked about where the money goes ever before. Um, and I think it's at this point, I think it's important for people to know that,
Definitely.
yeah,
I, of course, because in our ministry we have, platform use and all of those expenses add up. It's a lot to
yeah,
do.
it is. It really is. And in fact, I had someone say not too long ago, well, I don't see why she's charging, you know, I- it's like $20 for for a website, right? No, no, this stuff is not cheap. It's expensive.
Yeah,
And even if I didn't have a website, even if I was back on a free WordPress press blog, I still have expenses. There's still things that have to be maintained and paid for, and subscriptions and apps that I use that I can't do what I'm doing without. So, um, yeah, it's not free. It's not free. To do what I'm doing is not free. And I have had a lot of people say, I'd like this information. And they've also harassed me about charging. And I've said to them, I had to pay to find this information, but you keep hassling me about charging. So I'm not going to give it to you. Because if you don't stop hassling me about the fact that some of this requires payment, the information, some of it's not free, then you can forget sharing. So quit hassling me, and then we can have a better relationship. Tough love, I guess, in that sense. I would like it all to be free. If I had my druthers, I would make everything free. I'd pay for it out of pocket. But that's not possible at this point. So, yeah, it is what it is, and I appreciate um a lot of survivors who probably don't even have 26 extra dollars who do subscribe and make it possible because it is valuable to them.
I am very appreciative of what you do, Veronica, and your thorough researching and, posting the references and all of that. And so I know I'm very grateful, and our community is very grateful for what you do. It's
Thank you. That's kept me going. Knowing that you've said that a number of times has kept me going during times when I feel like ditching it all.
it's not an easy journey. And, as a survivor, to me, it's encouraging that there's someone out there who isn't, a survivor who is championing us and getting this information out. For some of us, we have to be a little more careful about how public we are with certain information, et cetera. And so you coming alongside, even though you're getting harassed, is a blessing and gives us courage, on this journey. So really,
Yep. Yeah, I can't imagine what you get if I get this level. I mean, this is nowhere near the level that a lot of survivors are hassled. Not just, if I've seen the death threats and I've seen the threats of lawsuit, and I've certainly seen those levied against survivors for speaking about their abuse. Um, and some are incarcerated and kept there uh, without due process. And so a lot of people have it a lot worse. It doesn't mean it's any less difficult to deal with in the moment, though. So yeah, the whatever you want to call it, the brotherhood, the cabal, the cult, the occult, they do not want their information known. And it's decades of my life, I never had heard of anybody, even the most outspoken public survivors' names were not something I was familiar enough with. Someone said to me once, "Well, why didn't you just, put Kathy O'Brien's information?" And I said, at that point, I didn't know her name. I wasn't familiar with who she was. I had to start somewhere, and I had to add on information from other survivors and other researchers and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still choosing new people and new information because altogether it makes a much bigger picture, a much more clear picture than individually. Um, and a lot of people want me to stop writing about the higher level survivors and just write about the lower level survivors. We'll call them the system slaves, for lack of a better term. That's not going to wake anybody up because it's not the whole picture. So, because things are so compartmentalized, whether you like a survivor or don't like a survivor doesn't really matter. If you're not willing to take the information that everybody gives out, and then you have to filter it and you have to weigh it against what other people say, and you have to take the discrepancies and adjust for that, and um, use your brain to figure out what might be the actual real underlying issue. But unless you can take all that information in and deal with it at once, you're not going to get the whole picture about the cult. You're just not. And a lot of survivors can't move outside of themselves. And I understand that. It's very difficult for them to deal with their own story, much less read or learn about other survivors' difficulties and abuses and torture and all that. It's just too much. But that's, I think, one thing that hopefully I can make a little bit easier is filtering the information and presenting it so that it is digestible. It's small enough. It's massaged enough so that it's not a trigger point, but that the information still gets across. Um,
I think you do a good job of that. And again, very grateful for it. It's not an easy journey for any of us, but I believe how the cult system is going to come down is through that exposure in the right time, in the right way. I know God has a plan for this, and that we get to be a part of it. And that's, to me, the exciting part of it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest information to me in the world. It's the thing that nobody's talking about. It's the thing that everybody talks around. All the bigwigs, the world bigwigs talk around. I just heard yesterday or the day before that Candace Owens got a call from President Trump, I guess, and he wants her to stop speaking about Macron's transgendered wife, alleged transgendered wife. You know, it's the thing that nobody wants to let out. It's the thing that they're dead scared, is that people will actually start to understand the depth and the depravity and the disgusting things that go on. And you can't take it in all at once for sure, but bit by bit, if you learn a little bit about it. And that's my hope, is that people who are um, exposed to it, but not in it themselves, learn a little. And I see that happening. I get a lot of messages from people saying, gosh, you know, my wife or my ex-wife or my girlfriend or, you know, my boyfriend, he told me all this stuff and I didn't understand. And then I read your book and it made so much sense. It put all the pieces together. It linked all the, you know, the missing links in the chain and made it a complete story. So that's the good thing. That's the good thing, is that the information is out there. And if you um, can manage to guard your heart and read it in whatever pieces that you can take it in as, then you'll know the bigger story.
And I think for me and for our community, the only way we can handle any of this is to know that God is so much more powerful than the cult system, even though in the natural it feels like they're in control and they have so much power. But God does have a way through for restoration and the triumph of their love. Um, because otherwise it's like, oh my goodness, some people just give up because it's too much, it's too complicated, um, too much harassment, too much death threats, and all of those things. It's not worth it to them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the number of show hosts and individuals who have dumped survivors, multiple survivors, is astonishing. And they do it, in my opinion. I don't know this for sure in every case, but they do it, in my opinion, because they're threatened or they've gotten bad information. And that's also, you know, really prevalent. Bad information abounds. And you can really identify someone who is interested in learning by whether they take that information and are open to looking for the extended picture, or if they're just going to look at one tweet and call that the end of everything. Nothing's answered by in the occult by one tweet. One tweet is not going to tell you virtually anything about anything. You're going to need a lot more information than that altogether. So if you're looking at someone who's hyper focused on one minute aspect of something and they've decided the entire situation by one tweet, then you're looking at someone who is probably part of the system and has been directed to misdirect people. So that's very, very common. I put out a lot of. It's interesting because I put out a number of blogs when they were free about specific individual information, and the people who have um, complained about one tweet, it's or something similar to that, and you say, well, here's the expanded explanation. They won't look at it, they won't read it. If they read it, they might not be able to understand it. If they, so it's a way of identifying who's looking for truth, who really is interested, and who isn't. So I think that's the thing about the harassers, and it's the thing about understanding and knowing God, like you said. If you get a lot of harassment, it's almost good, because it's going to sharpen your toolbox. It's going to force you to learn new things. It's going to, um, you either figure out spiritual warfare or you give up. You have the choice to do either one. You can give up if you want, but if you want to go on, you're going to have to figure out how to protect yourself. You're going to have to figure out what is really important to know to protect yourself, and it's all there. And unfortunately, some of it I think is hidden from Christians, so we don't really get the full picture on how to protect yourself from the occult. You can go to church for your entire life and never hear anything about that. So sometimes and I've had discussions recently with people about this. Sometimes what you're going to learn about being a Christian comes from understanding what the occult does. And that, I think, also is something that is difficult for a lot of people to accept, that in order to learn about the Bible, sometimes you have to learn about the occult end, and that will enhance what you know about biblical Christianity, because you're not going to hear a lot about the Old Testament Babylon and, battling demons in your Sunday morning church service, because most pastors just aren't going to go there. They don't want to do that. They don't want to empty the room, right? So where do you learn about spiritual warfare? Well, you get yourself into a mess by directly offending the Lucifer and his minions. And then you say, wow, okay, this is interesting. How do I deal with this? How do I stop myself from getting astral attacked in the middle of the night and in the middle of a dream? How do I stop them from interfering with my equipment? How do I stop them from, like, crashing my computer or whatnot? How do I stop them? How do I protect myself? And then how do I protect myself so that they don't have access to me? And that's a whole other set of learning and skills, and a lot of people have been interested in that. So that's lovely to see. You can protect yourself. You can align yourself more with God. You have to learn how to detach yourself and that's one of the greatest values to me in learning about the occult is, boy, how much we are inadvertently attached just by living in the world. We're inadvertently attached to the spirits and the food and the stuff they attach to the boxes and the equipment that we bring into our house, and we don't know that. And so all this stuff can make you, um, uh, well, it can cause problems. It just causes problems. But if you know that it exists, then you know how to pray, and you know what to ask for. And if you know what to ask for, then ask and you shall receive.
So good.
Yeah.
And in our community right now, we're exploring the first 5 chapters of the book of Revelation. And usually that's considered the scary territory. And I believe the enemy has tried to do that. But I believe actually in that first 5 chapters, there is so much that is actually keys for survivors to overcome, but it's been taught in such a scary way that people avoid it. And yet there are so many references just in the messages to the churches
Yeah.
that have to do with the occult. And, Jesus' solution for that. And, all the beautiful heavenly scenes of Jesus as the one who overcomes and is able to open the scroll and all of those things. If we can have that viewpoint, the power and majesty of who God is, I believe that helps us to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, knowledge is power, and knowledge on both sides is power. And I think for me, I would not have come to where I am spiritually today by ignoring the stuff that you don't really want to learn, right? Ignoring the things that are difficult, ignoring the the deep occult, ignoring I call it in my own head the after effects of Nimrod and his belligerence, right? So all of the stuff that went underground when he refused to stop doing the witchcraft and all the stuff that was causing trouble. All of these underground societies are there because they were there just, for a long time, thousands and thousands of years. And understanding that and knowing that, this is nothing new. It's been around. It's going to probably be around. I can't take care of it. I can learn about it and I can help other people get out of their current situation with information and knowledge. But I'm not going to be able to solve the problem. God can solve that. He's the only one.
Yeah,
We just have to come together and hopefully help one another out, help one another through the difficult times. And so thank you for doing that for me. And I hopefully do that for you sometimes as well, and many others.
I appreciate it. And to me, that's the amazing thing is that as much as the cult for thousands and thousands of years has been, planning and propagating this stuff and programming generations into this, and all of the torture and torment is they cannot, I believe, fully erase humanity. They're trying hard, especially with AI and other things right now. But
Mm.
the way I see it is there's this golden thread that is in every human. And, it traces back to our origin in God. And, He has a plan of restoration. Um, and I believe there's like a back door of hope. Computer programmers always have that back door, for access.
Yeah.
But I believe our creator has a back door. Um, and so, I'm always amazed. I can get inundated with the complexity of what, the cult does and how sophisticated everything is and how layered it is. But turning my eyes, to the true and living God and seeing, they created us so marvelously and wonderfully. And the cult tries to exploit all this stuff, and yet they cannot fully take over or erase our true connection and humanity to the true Lord Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, and the more people know just how negative, and awful and truly, life draining, following even a small amount of things that are connected to the occult is, and if they can make that choice, learn about it, and make the choice to turn away from it, then that's a good thing. But if you don't know that it's bad, and you don't even know that it's connected to Lucifer, if you don't know that it's connected to a bad system that is not of God, then you have less of a choice, less of a possibility of making that choice. So I guess that's my small contribution to the overall big effort that God's going to take care of, whether I'm around or not. But I think we still have to
yeah.
do our part while we're here. I'm not just going to sit. Someone sent me a verse that I don't think I've seen before, but essentially, and I'll have to paraphrase it because I haven't memorized it, but essentially, we're not to sit around attaching ourselves to people who are idle believers. It's in Thessalonians somewhere. We need to be doing something. We need to be active, and it's not the only thing we need to be doing, but we're we're commanded to help one another.
Yeah. And I think part of the confusion also is we're kind of programmed to, especially in the church, just like bad, evil, Satan, anything that's good, that's going to be God. And, that's part of what the system has capitalized on is yes, they do have this dark, horrible side. But then the light side of the system, a lot of people don't understand.
No,
So, the system is going to have this two-prong approach. Yes, you're getting harassment and these death threats and all of this going on, but also they infiltrate ministries and other groups, and they can look like they're doing good. They can look like they're helping survivors,
yeah,
and yet they're just reprogramming them. And so that's where probably sometimes the bigger danger is
yeah.
in the light side of the system and what they do.
Yeah, it's so true. There are so many organizations that purport to help survivors that actually don't. And and I'm astonished. I've been astonished recently at the number of people who don't want to believe that they're bad organizations. The information about them is out there, but well, I don't know. I don't know myself personally. I don't have any good information. Well, you can believe survivors when they say what they say. If they say this individual, I have experience with them, and they are a programmer, or they are a persecutor, or they are deep in the occult, you might want to listen to them and take their word for it, because it's a dangerous thing to say those things out loud. A lot of times, naming individual names can get you killed. Point blank, bottom line. So if they've named individuals who are not good, then you can take their word for it and avoid those organizations like the plague. There are, I think, more organizations out there who are infiltrated and working for the cult than I think there are good organizations not working for the cult. So I support your organization. I have supported your organization financially. The blog supports you, and so I think that from my vantage point, people can trust you and what you're doing. But there are a lot of organizations that are not that aren't they just aren't trustworthy. which is sad. And you're right. I've heard from survivors who will not talk publicly. They'll tell me things, but they won't say anything publicly. But they'll say, gosh, if every single person on the panel of a conference is obviously not out of the system, and you can identify all of them as not being out of the system, then what those people are doing is likely programming the audience during their talk or somehow, which kind of surprised me when I heard it, but it makes so much sense. If they're literally filling a room with survivors and then inviting people to talk who are not out of the system, the purpose of that is likely programming.
Mhm.
So again, join together with believers, join together with people with whom you have a common purpose, and you know, reach out to and try to help those who don't have all the information. Um,
It
and
is complicated, as I've shared before. Getting out of the system isn't uh, is very, very challenging for anyone.
yeah,
And they don't care if it looks like you've gotten a certain level of healing, um, and you kind of get that platform to share, as long as you don't go to the next level of healing. And so
mm,
I think it requires humility, in survivors, and myself included, of going, I'm doing everything I know consciously to be free from the system, and continuing an extensive, therapeutic journey, um, because I want to be sure that whatever I'm doing, um, is flowing from the true Lord Jesus, and trusting Him to protect me, and to
yeah,
protect those in my community, um, because there's layers that I'm still uncovering,
yeah,
and so that's the challenge in this, is that we want to honor, survivors who are coming out and who are doing stuff, um, but also being aware of the dangers and not just taking everything in, that anybody says, wholesale, without a lot of prayer and discernment and all of those kinds of things. And so it's not an easy kind of place to walk out.
no, no, it's not. And if you're like myself, not exposed to any of it initially, so if you're coming from this from my standpoint, learning about it takes a while. And it's okay. It's okay to just learn without judging to start with. And it's okay to then get to a point where you feel like you have enough information where you can start to make informed opinions or informed decisions about what might be more true or less true, and who might be better to listen to and follow than others. You know,
Yes.
so there is a journey in it. There's an evolution. There's um, an education, a stepwise increase in the education, and that's the sad part is that none of this is going to be taught anywhere to any the 12 years or whatever, however many years you go to school these days. I guess from kindergarten to grade 12 is 13 years of school if you do pre-K more. Um, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to go through, and then to be faced with, gee, there's this whole other thing that seems to run the world that nobody talks about. It's okay to start somewhere and learn bits as you go, and it's okay to just take it all in and know that the occult is good at lying. They're very good at lying. They're very good at dissembling. They're very good at hiding information. They're very good at half truths and 80% truths and everything in between. And you can but you have to be dogged about it, and you've got to keep up with it a little bit. Um, and it's okay not to believe anything I write or anything anybody says if that's the route you want to go. You're also free to do that. At least in the U.S., we're still a free country in that respect. We don't have to believe something about anything at this time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And it's
what?
very
Go
confusing
ahead.
for survivors, in that, again, some of my early memories, it was like, was it real? Was it a program setup? Was it virtual reality? I was just having a conversation with, Jesse, about dragons in my last episode. And, my question to her was, are they real creatures or are they fallen angels or, are they VCR program setups, and it's kind of all of the above. And so that's what's hard to differentiate, with one survivor. Would you classify it as a fallen being, in another situation as a living creature?
Yeah.
That it has a lot of nuances to it and consequences.
Yeah, I mean that's a brings up a whole probably other topic, another layer of, learning about the spirit world and learning about the spirit world being layered upon the physical world and learning that there are spirit beings. I mean, if your only exposure to any of this has been the concept of a ghost, well, that's good to start with, but there's so much more to it. I had an interesting conversation with someone at one point because they were talking about their biological parents as being reptilian shapeshifters, but that individual was not themselves a reptilian shapeshifter, and we kind of we discussed it a lot because it just didn't make any sense to me. And finally, what they said is, this is really complicated and there are no great answers to any of it. I just know what I've experienced, and I know I'm not a shapeshifter, but I know these two individuals both were because I've seen it with my own eyes. And so, Jesse describes shape-shifting as a spirit indwelling an individual or creature, and others don't describe it like that. And that's okay as well. Others just say, um, that you aren't going to be able to see shape-shifting at all unless you have certain genetic bloodlines. If you're outside of those genetic bloodlines, maybe you can't see shapeshift. Maybe you can't see werewolves. Maybe you can't see Bigfoot unless you have a certain genetic component, which goes straight back to, human beings being created in God's image, and we are different genetically from angels, and we're different genetically from fallen angelics and giants. And so, that whole aspect of why exactly are humans different, and what percentage maybe you have to be, or what kind of genetics do you have to say be able to see shape shifting or be able to see in the spirit world? Is it genetic? Is it not genetic? Is it just a spiritual gift that gets, imposed upon you for no particular reason except that God wants it to be? It's very complicated. It's very confusing to try to figure all that out, but it's also fun. It's also kind of a fun exercise if this is something that you're interested in, and a lot of people are. A lot of people want to know about the werewolves and cryptids and Bigfoot and all that other stuff. So um, and then you've got the UFO crowd, and you can get into the occult via that. And then you've got the alchemy crowd, and you can get into the occult information via that. There are lots of avenues that you can find this interesting. You can go a lot of different directions. It is going to give me a lot of material, probably for as long as I ever wanted to write. I don't think I'm ever going to run out of material, frankly.
Very true.
Oh. Well,
It,
thank you for letting me wax on and on and on about the blog. I think it's important for me because I'm not on the other side. I'm not perceiving what I'm doing as a reader or just a party outside of the blog. I'm not able to put myself in that position very much. And I think it's useful for people to know the truth behind it and kind of some of the hidden aspects that are more technical and less glamorous than reading a post. Um, and it's important for me to be able to talk about the harassment and to know that it's ongoing, and I'm probably never going to get rid of it, and that's okay because um, whoever's tasked to do that is tasked to do that, and it just keeps me sharper, and it's annoying, but um, if you look at I'm not, most survivors, I'm not dead and I'm not, incarcerated, and there's a lot worse places to be. And I don't wish that upon anybody, but unfortunately, a lot of people are in that position. So bring awareness to their plight, and um, try to keep it in the public eye enough that uh, that it's not so easy for the cult to do those kinds of things to people. Um, like you said, information and awareness and bringing all this stuff, even the really uncomfortable stuff and the really nasty stuff, bringing it to the surface just
Yeah,
means that we're a little bit more empowered and a little bit more protected and a little bit more aware.
totally. And I believe especially the church should be a safe refuge for survivors, and for the most part, it's not.
Yeah.
And so I believe, we as, as a church body need to understand these things so that we can provide the services that are needed, the love that is needed. Love is the greatest healer. There's a
Mhm.
lot of techniques out there, but ultimately, God created us relational beings and created us to heal in relationship. And so that's a lot of our focus in what we do. And I really hope that the awareness gets out, especially in churches. I do believe that there is a mass exodus coming, from the cult system. I don't know what that's going to look like, but there's going to need to be safe places where survivors can go and get the help that they need to walk this out. And so I don't fully know what that's going to look like, but I really appreciate what you do in getting, the word out. So,
Thank you so much. I
right.
appreciate you as well. We are a mutual admiration society, and I'm good with that.
Oh,
Hmm.
well, thank you so much, Veronica, for being on today. And just want to encourage those who are watching. I hope this opens your eyes to, what it takes to be in the public eye and to do these kinds of things, that we pray for one another and do everything we can to bring more awareness to this topic. So thank you.
Amen.
And we will see you next time on Testimony Mountain.